Welcome back to another episode of Fond Memories there. If you recognize that buzzing in the background, then you recognize this game I'm about to talk about. This is Total Annihilation, an RTS game that is revered by many to be the best RTS of all time. If not the best, it's definitely up there in your top 5 to pretty much anyone who's ever played this game, I would imagine. Because it is truly a unique far cry to what the traditional RTS games were of the time, and even today at this point. Whereas most RTS games like StarCraft, Command and Conquer, and many other games like Dune and the sorts, you had like limited amounts of resources to have to gather to build your army, and were forced to kind of like either expand your territory to get additional resources or just destroy your opponent quickly before you actually ran out of resources and then went dry on your production. Total Annihilation, they took a different approach on this. Not only is the resources you gather essentially limitless, they are going to keep functioning for you until the very end of the game, but you can get massive scale of units here. More so than what you could get from other games, essentially. It is a game that I look back to incredibly fondly, for I played both the campaigns there of the original version of the game. I did not play the expansions. I did not play too much with the mods and that you had available, but this is a game that had a lot of flexibility to it, I guess you could say, because there were websites that you could pretty much create your own units to be built into the game there due to the modding scene. You can, of course, create your own maps, which was true with many other RTS type games, most notably StarCraft 2 with its like in-game map editor that it had there that made completely original game modes inside the game, which of course eventually led towards the ever so popular MOBAs as a result of Warcraft 3. But it's hard for me to truly explain how this game is, so let me just get into it and get into the basics of this game. Right now we are pretty much in like a smaller window screen mode for the purposes of streaming, but thankfully, through the benefit of actually playing this live here, you can actually play this in pretty much like 1080p, which is what I'm currently able to run in game now. But otherwise, there's the option of the campaign there, which is run by narration, and you got this skirmish mode there as well. If you can invest the time to get it all sorted out, there is an online scene for the sorts, although you cannot use the traditional multiplayer function here, as I believe, which is, Cavedog.com, I guess is where it's set up here. But otherwise, you would have to try and find like an addition, like a website there. I believe Total Annihilation Universe, I believe is called. There's an actual website dedicated to that type of stuff there. So it is still being played online of sorts there, but you're gonna have to put a little bit of effort into it, and that's probably where this game shines the most. But for the purpose of this game, let's get into it and have a look, shall we? So this is Total Annihilation in a nutshell here. It is running at 1080p, so everything is stretched out quite a bit, which is, if you pay attention closely, is apparent by the fact that this map is pretty small, needless to say. Otherwise, it would be double its size for like the traditional monitors of its time. Was it? I forget the resolutions, but essentially, like I said, the resources are pretty limited here. You have two different sources available to you. One is metal, which you have to find on the ground there by these metal seams that are shown on the ground. They come in different amounts, different visual variations to indicate how rich they are. And the second one, which is far more plentiful and easily to gather, is the energy. So you would build all sorts of different type of energy type resources there, and it will allow you to gain power. And I think I already messed up my starting build here a little bit. I ended up getting the metal extractors first rather than the solar power plants. But essentially, once these power sources are built and operational, you're going to get power indefinitely from these things. And you can build as much as you want there to build it up, and your only limiting factor for majority of this gameplay is pretty much how you handle your metal. Thankfully, there are a lot of ways to get around that. And so, like a lot of traditional RTS type of games, you just basically are building up an army there to just destroy the other team with. maybe this isn't exactly the best map to go looking at, because we're kind of stuck with this water in the middle there, so I can't just go being aggressive with my opponents there. But you have 4 different types of production facilities there. You got your K-Bots, which are your robot walkers. You got your vehicle plant for tanks. You got aircraft for obviously aircrafts, and you have your shipyard for your ship production, if you happen to be on maps that involve water. And you have lots of different other resources available here. The good old games version that I have currently running has all the expansions available to me. So like some of these are like expansion type units in that productions you can build. Otherwise, I'll just quickly run down the basics of this game here. You're like as I was already said, for the skirmish modes here, you're just trying to destroy the other team there by any means necessary. The bots are actually pretty competent, I find, from my few little skirmish games that I actually played here. Although they do tremendously start to bug out if you play like heavy water region maps, so you do need to be careful in that. Heck, even on a map like this, I think the water in general is going to bug them out, so this may not be the best map for like playing against the AI in a sense, but if you actually were to play AI there, if you don't have like a landbite who would play this game with there, or don't want to put the effort into trying to figure things out in Total Annihilation universe, then the AI is pretty confident for like to kill some hours there to enjoy a game of its time. So you got all sorts of different ways to actually generate power. We have wind generators for like basically for specific maps. These are really cheap there, but you can get a lot more resource out of them. It's pretty varied sometimes there. Like this map here, I'm actually getting more energy resources than I am from the solar plants, but as you can see right now, it does have its high and low points, so you need to be careful in that. But this is a large-scale type of battle there. This is not like really micro-intensive like Command Conquer and StarCraft would be there, although you could try and micro it, but a lot of these units are very fragile, and you get them en masse, so it is pretty hard to kind of keep most of your general units alive there, unless you want to kind of micro your bigger ships. But otherwise, there are like 2 different tiers to this game here, and it gets a lot of variety there. Like you have access to geothermal plants here, which can only be built on specific power sources here for tremendous power boost. And since the scarcity of metal is kind of limited for most of these maps, you have access to convert your power into like different forms of metal, or into metal rather. So if you have a surplus of energy, you can just straight up build these metal makers here, turn the power into actual metal for you. And also, one of the other additional features that they did with Total Annihilation, as opposed to like StarCraft and maybe a couple other type of RTS games of its time, is this progressive type of production, whereas the resource will slowly dwindle over time as the productions are being built, as opposed to like StarCraft, which is kind of the first game that comes to my mind there, where you have to pay for it up front and completely. So a Marine would cost like 50 minerals of its resources there to build, and you have to hand it in right away. And of course, Total Annihilation here, you actually build it you build it over time there. Like, let's see, if I were to build these Pee-wees, which are like my gunslinger type scout bots, it would cost me 53 metal, but it would do that over its entire production. So it's hard to really demonstrate now, because I'm actually not investing all that much in resources to kind of lose out on it at the moment. But as I put more demand onto the resources there, it'll start to shrink down over time as it's building. The commander unit's pretty good at building stuff really quickly, so it is reliable for me to drain my resource quite quickly. And of course, there's a lot of different play styles here. Like there's these metal and energy storages you can use if you feel like there are downtimes where you're going to start building up resources, or heck, you're just not all that efficient at playing these RTS type of games optimally, especially with the Total Annihilation, where you will have periods where you're going to have to try and stock up on resources, especially since there's an additional mechanic to kind of harvest the terrain itself to an extent to kind of build up your energy. Like I can easily harvest trees or scrap metal from destroyed buildings to kind of as an additional way to build up resources. Although it doesn't help if I don't want this thing to go in defensive mode, damn it. I just want to destroy it to kind of emphasize my point, but not going very well. Wreckage from battling units or even along the terrain itself there, you can just harvest to get additional metal as well, which is pretty important because on most of these maps, most of these battlefields, you're going to be quite starved there. And it's kind of unique and kind of scrappy at the same time. If you're pressed for minerals, you are going to essentially be harvesting these minerals there. It's kind of Total Annihilation's way of like having your workers go out and be vulnerable to attack and being harassed, because you're going to need to go out for optimal type of play anyway. You're going to need to go out and harvest as much resources as you can, especially since a lot of the wreckage and resources you're going to be gathering is going to be up on the front line where all the fighting is going to be. So it's a little bit different than like fighting workers or harvesters in like Command & Conquer or SCV and probes in StarCraft, but is a lot more risky, but it's also very rewarding to keep your production going, because the wreckage I find in these type of games, unless you completely obliterate with like heavy firepower there, you get like almost 75% of your metal back as you invest it into these units. So if I had a really powerful experimental tanks that are really costly to build, like the Bulldogs, which are like the upgrade vehicle tank, what is it? They call it an advanced vehicle plant type of tanks. They're your heavy tanks. If I only had like a handful of them and I need to kind of get the metal back there so I can keep the production going for those Bulldogs, then I can risk either my commander unit or like another construction unit to kind of harvest that metal, so that way I'm not strained to have to rebuild them essentially. But that is the basics here of Total Annihilation. I'm going to go back into my actual campaign there, which this is like about 8 missions in. This is like the water plant essentially, and what we have here, I'm actually enjoying the campaign so far, but I'm playing on the hardest difficulty so far, and this is pretty much where it introduces you to a lot of water ships. So you are pretty limited on your ground troops essentially. You're gonna have to do like transport if you want there, but this is example what I'm talking about. I have only like 2 metal extractors available to me, and I have a lot of power turbines that I'm using through the water to kind of get my power generation going. But a lot of what I'm talking about is keeping my inefficient resources coming in, especially metal there, as I have like my commander unit out here to kind of try and harvest these resources. Like this Ranger, which is a tier 2 type of battleship, is kind of a support ship there. It gives me 1,000 metal, which is basically, if I'm looking at it properly, it's about half the metal actually of what my Ranger is. So that is pretty important to salvage for me. So as for to keep my construction ships and all those ships safe there, I'm going to have to continually push up there and keep salvaging this metal, as well as keep trying to push up in general, so I can continue to gain ground, because the campaign there, your opponent, depending on which side you pick there are 2 factions available to you, are going to be pretty much superior to you in almost every way. You're just going to have to try and hold your ground there and start slowly pushing out and gain what little ground you can bit by bit. So it is pretty important to kind of entrench yourself pretty well and then surge out as you get the opportunity. And plus, since the bots will be, the computers, and especially in the campaign, are going to be gradually pushing at you in big waves, you can get a huge resurgence if you can salvage the metal from the wreckage of their units, essentially. And this is, I believe, the final mission of the water plant here, where I'm trying to capture a galactic gate. So that way I can push back and to start pushing the enemy team, which is the core in this case. The faction I'm playing is called the Arm, where I will try and repel their forces here, because originally how both stories start is you got the enemy faction is successfully managed to reach your home world, essentially. So you are trying to push forward, repel them, and then start capturing these galactic gates so you can initiate a powerful counterattack, essentially. So in this case, I am on the second world after defending the home system, or home planet. So I am trying to get the Galactic Gate here and slowly but surely push forward. And they have a lot of defenses I need to chip aside. Like, they even got aircrafts, which I do not have access to yet. That is like after, if I remember correctly, I get access to aircrafts after this mission here when I reach the third planet. But the battle is pretty much constant. It is always underway, especially if you have the production to keep it going. In this case, I am running short of metal, and I need to keep that salvaging going. It is pretty damn important too, because like a lot of these wreckages giving me like 500 to 800 metal there for each ship essentially. Which for all my tier 1 ships like these Crusaders here, that is enough metal to kind of rebuild one there. So salvaging this to keep the momentum going is pretty key, because without it, I would not have the resources to even push out of my starting region here, because I would have had just a handful of ships, only one shipyard to build units from, and that would pretty much overwhelm me if I didn't start salvaging the corpses or the wreckage of the ships there, of both mine and the core. So you have to be very scrappy in these harder difficulties. So even Total Annihilation this day would be a very satisfying type of campaign experience for pretty much anyone, I would imagine, even on the lower difficulties. I am playing on the hardest difficulty at the moment there, so it's hard to gauge how simplified it would be for lower difficulty. But I need to be very careful. This is my only construction ship there, and I have my commander who can also salvage, but I'm trying to get him building more stuff on the ground here. So, did I lose? I just lost my construction ship, so I'm going to have to rebuild that. And sadly, I do not have access to everything just yet, because I believe the reason these ships are grayed out is because I believe those are only including the expansions. And since I'm playing the campaign, that they do not get unlocked here until I play the campaign stories. So, but they are still highlighted there in gray. Otherwise, so I got plenty of metal so far, so I can actually keep expanding my operation here. Slowly starting to gain ground. I still got plenty of ships here. Really, if it wasn't for this metal, I would have a massive fleet right now. Because I'm still slowly starting to push up there. I captured almost half the map. And I'm starting to basically almost captured the entirety of the water, it looks like here. It looks like the last battle is going to take place on this island here, which I'm going to have to start bombarding. Pretty much. But thankfully I have my highest tier battleships, which is the Millennium here. Which can be a very potent bombardment type ship here, as well as long range support, whereas the Ranger here is kind of a siege missile and anti-air type ship, firing his guided missiles there and having his long range missiles to kind of hit anything that's pretty much stationary. Not the most reliable at hitting damaging the other fleet, but it is still a pretty powerful ship when you consider the AI a lot of times is going to be fighting you stationarily. So I'm going to have to get these ships going, and I need more salvage. Otherwise, this has been a very enjoyable experience for me. I only been 8 missions in on the hard difficulty. There has been a little bit of like bullshit moments there where like the last mission on the first world, the ARMS homeworld there, involved having to like defeat an entrenched core position there with lots of turrets there that was on like a small island. And considering I had no actual shipyards available to me, you had to kind of force yourself to build like a bunch of like amphibious tanks which could not fire underwater. So if they still had like any of their torpedo platforms there, which they had 1 or 2 available, like torpedo launchers, they could shoot down your tanks there in the process, which can be very frustrating there, especially if you risk pushing your commander up there, because as soon as you lose your commander, so you have keep an eye on him. As soon as you lose your commander unit here, which is kind of like the closest to what you have as a hero unit for pretty much all your games, it's pretty much game over. You instantly lose as a result, so you kind of have to rely on using your amphibious tanks primarily unless you're really good at controlling him, which can be very slow and tedious and quite a bit of a grind. So that's the only issue I had as far as the campaign's going there. But otherwise, if you play this as a campaign game and you're pretty good at managing your resources, this game turns into a constant like tug of war type of battle there, where you're constantly fighting the other team, you're constantly building up your ships, and I do not want to lose this ranger, but I did. He went the wrong way, so. But otherwise, this is like a nice constant tug of war type of game he play here, whereas you can just keep pushing up, you keep trying to gain ground there, and you're trying to eke out that extra little advantage there, either through your wreckage there, expanding your territory like I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to set like a production facility on this main island here, so I could start pushing out with ground infantry, as opposed to actually like getting transport ships, which I think I already built one. Yeah, if you were actually transport ships, this would be one here, the Hulk, which is one way to kind of force troops onto a position, onto an island there, whereas in this case I'm just going to straight up build units. And once I get several of these going there, although I am limited on space there, I'm going to have a lot of troops to push out. And this is also one of the first original RTS games that actually introduced like a 3D engine, or 3D type of play to it there. We're sure there is like elevation of sorts on like StarCraft Command & Conquer there. This one actually involves an elevation where you can shoot over it, or it can obstruct your shots altogether there. If depending on, like, your artillery actually can fire all right over this terrain there if you know how to do it. If you can understand the elevation of your weapons. Although I'm trying to figure out how to shoot this thing. Millennium does not want to cooperate right now. Yeah, like right there, I'm able to actually shoot over that hill, but if I were to try with this Crusader, I don't think it's going to work very well because it doesn't have much range. Like, if I were to try shooting that, it would probably not be able to shoot over the hill, although it's hard to... It's actually kind of tricky to gauge there a little bit. But there is actual elevation in the sense where artillery weapons can fire over obstacles there. And you can also use, like, terrain, even these metal scraps, as like a temporary wall, essentially, to kind of protect yourself while your artillery ships actually shoot it unhindered from behind it there. So it works out pretty well in that sense. I'm trying to replicate so I can demonstrate. There we go. A very basic representation, but the Millennium's actually able to shoot over it easily, whereas the Crusader's not able to. Unless I can shoot far enough behind there to kind of get the elevation, I guess. A very basic example. Although, as far as modern day type of RTSs there are not really much type of... What is it? Hotkeys and being able to group up your units there, so you have no easy way to kind of switch between units and kind of build them. You have to do it pretty much by hand with the mouse, almost exclusively. So that can get a little bit tedious there, a little bit redundant in times, but you can slowly build at the sense of scale you can get with this game here, and the scrappy nature and the limitless resources. If you want a game there with constant battle, especially with a buddy there for like the skirmish modes, or if you want to play with a competent AI, this is pretty much the game for you. You're going to play massive large scale type of battles. So with nearly constant warfare, endless destruction, because some of these high tier ships or buildings that you can get have like the ability to shoot like across the map there. You have like actual doomsday weapons like the nuclear missile, which essentially destroys anything within its blast radius, essentially. It may not be the most visually impressive type of thing because it's just a massive explosion there that lasts for like a brief moment. But it is potentially devastating. You get like these massive artillery cans called, like, for ARM it's called Big Bertha, essentially, where you could just straight up just destroy anything from across the map. And also there's one weapon here that I'm using on this commander. I gotta be careful he doesn't die. He's got something called a D gun, a disintegration gun beam, I guess. Whereas for a small price of energy, I could just straight up destroy anything that touches it. It doesn't matter what it is. The downside, of course, is you lose the scrap in the process, so it's probably not the most efficient way to kill things for long term, but it is destructive. It will destroy anything and everything in its way. Even a Millennium there. Just disintegrating, you lose the wreckage entirely though. So if you want weapons of mass destruction here, you got a lot of it here in the sense of your commander and the higher tier weapons and nuclear weaponry. It is on the simple scale, mind you. It's like you only have like one or two type of massive weaponry and incredibly potent type of weapons. But in the end, Total Annihilation still satisfying me tremendously in this type of game. The amount of hours I played so far have been very satisfying, especially with the campaign, I gotta say, because the last mission I just did on this campaign here, where you have to survive like waves, essentially, of increasingly powerful ships there, including their top tier, like, was it the Warlords, which are like kind of like Millennium there, where they have a large laser. They have a laser turret attached to it, as well as like the artillery cannon on the back there. Whereas my Millennium has two like artillery cannons on it. So I have still been enjoying this game tremendously so far. It's been a fun experience. It's been going well. And unfortunately, since I'm playing this windowed mode, there is no like cinematics or anything like that you get at the very beginning. But let's see, as you go through this game here, you do get narration of sorts.
Use of the second captured core gate, the armed commander took a step further into core territory. Tergiverse 4 was once a sparkling water world like Thalassian, but had been drained dry, its resources used elsewhere in support of the war. The core had tapped into the last significant source of water remaining on the planet, a large underground lake more than a mile beneath the surface.
So yeah, I really do like the narration, although it's pretty straightforward and basic. They're just more or less giving you a briefing about the situation. And the story itself of Total Annihilation is pretty straightforward as well. It's basically just humanity has managed to evolve in a sense where they can supplant their intelligence or their consciousness into machines there, essentially. The core, which were the ruling state originally, wanted to append a decree to make everyone be forced into this type of concept, or what, I forget what the graphing or processing, I forget what the terminology is actually called, but to integrate all humanity into these machines, essentially, and essentially giving them immortality. And the ARM is like the rebelling force that essentially broke away using cloning technology to pilot their machines there to match the scale and numbers of the core, essentially. And then this battle has been basically waging for 1,000 years, per the story, kind of making it a grand galactic scale, but otherwise it's just endless war essentially ever since there. So it's a pretty generic storyline there, neat idea about humanity's ascension to immortality and the consequence of that, but other than that, it's just you basically deciding the end of the war, essentially, is all it is. And in this case, we're going to a certain planet here, where essentially you teleport into a new world there, and I get access to my aircrafts. I pretty much if I'm understanding correctly, because this used to be a water world, so everything is like lots of craters and small islands on top of, essentially on pillars, in the basic sense. So this is where the airplay comes into play. It is clever how they introduce like the airplay in this sense, because this used to be a water world that's been drained completely, and there's the factor of the elevation being implemented right there, where you get a lot. The fog of war isn't reliably revealed until you're on the edge of the hill, but you're gonna have to rely on aircrafts, and heck, it doesn't even allow me to build ground troops in this sense. So it kind of forces you to play with the units in this sense, which is kind of fine for this one-time mission at least. And then after that, you get essentially everything at this point. You start unlocking the tier 2 structures themselves on the fourth planet, I believe. But this is slowly how it introduces you to everything there. And then of course the final missions there, which I believe there's one world before you actually get on the home world, which here's a nice little fun fact. The core homeworld itself, where you could play skirmishes on and of course play in the campaign, is entirely made of metal. So everything you just witnessed up to this point is the scarcity of metal and having to work around it there. Imagine playing on a planet that's entirely made of metal where you get additional resources there. And imagine the truly massive scale of fighting on a map like that. Just take a moment to realize what you just witnessed here. And if you really want to go crazy, a big game hunters type of map there for like StarCraft essentially. I don't know what the equivalent would be for like Command Conquer if there ever was. And then just put it into Total Annihilation where you could truly have these massive grand scale battles where with pretty little space required to get it going. But yes, that is Total Annihilation in a nutshell there. I don't think I give the game justice there, but the music, I gotta say, I love to death there. It is definitely high quality type of music. I am trying to find the battle type musics, because it does, you can customize how you want the music to transition, whether it just plays randomly, it goes in, it plays every single one through the list one by one. You can do a repeat on a single song, or in the case of custom there, where it tries to gauge where you are in the game so far there, where it automatically transitions. Oops, let me stop that there. I'm trying to stop it, it's not letting me. Well, this is not going well. And even turning it off is not working, so. But otherwise, I lost my train of thought there. This is not going well. Otherwise, this game tries to anticipate, gauge what's going on in the moment there in a lot of cases. Like, if I were to go into a battle, it would try to transition to combat style music here. It's not doing a very good job right here, technically, but normally this would transition to like dramatic music for me there. Oh, and I'm about to lose my commander, so we'll just show off what that looks like, I guess. It's just a simple nuclear explosion there, ending the game. But it doesn't seem to do it justice in the campaign, it seems like I've been noticing. But in skirmishing that, it tries to gauge where your music's from. And the music is tremendous. I'll just shut up and let it go. If it'll let me increase it properly. And that is lovely music there, I gotta say. From what I understand, he was made from an artist of sorts there, who used to be from Squaresoft. I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. I'll probably put links to him and the designers who actually made the game here. But I've been having tremendous luck with this game here, Total Annihilation. It's been a lot of fun to play. So I've been having a blast with it. There's a lot this game has to offer, and the music's still going apparently, which a bit of a musical bug, I think. And I have no way to stop it. I don't know how to stop it there, unfortunately. So, okay, after fixing a little glitch there briefly, I pretty much lost my train of thought there, but that's Total Annihilation in a nutshell. I actually did look up the composer who did the music for the game there, and he's Jeremy Soule apparently. I'll put his link down in the description below for everyone, as well as some of the main key designers there. So he did that lovely track there. I enjoyed it quite significantly there. And one thing to note that I have not paid attention, this game was made by Cavedog Entertainment, which, if you never heard of them, the interesting thing to keep in mind is that they only made Total Annihilation type games. So if you haven't played a single Total Annihilation game, you probably have not heard of them. Because they made like Total Annihilation, then they made Total Annihilation Kingdoms, and then they pretty much were bought by Atari essentially. And then they ceased to exist ever since. They probably went on to make a couple of games afterwards, but never under the Cavedog logo, and never making another Total Annihilation sequel aside from those two games. The creators and developers did go on to make like games like Supreme Commander and of course Planetary Annihilation, which is the latest spiritual successor to this game. It has been a tremendously popular game. I had a lot of fun with it. I loved the campaign and the fun of it as a youth, and even with the knowledge and skills of like modern day type of gameplay, it has still been a lot of fun. A little bit of inconvenience trying to control everything, but the scale and the fact that it works with the resolution of today, 1080p there, makes it even more massive scale, which are larger size armies. Although you do suffer a little bit from the inconvenience of the smaller minimap and like the UI in general. But that has been my fond memories of Total Annihilation.